The universe was ancient, vast beyond comprehension, and held together not by treaties or fleets, but by one unspoken law that every civilization obeyed. That law was older than memory, etched into the foundations of interstellar order: do not disturb the humans. No species alive could trace the exact origin of this edict, yet all knew of it. Whispers of collapsed empires, of entire star clusters reduced to silence, carried through archives like shadows. Records were fragmented, deliberately erased, as if to hide something too dreadful to confront directly. But the caution remained. It was said that humanity had risen once, soared higher than any before them, and then chosen to withdraw into a slumber that even time itself respected. Out of either reverence or terror, the galaxy built its civilization around their absence. Among the countless races, belief in this rule was nearly universal. Whole cultures recited it as scripture, their children raised on tales of what might happen if humans were awakened. Merchants would not speak their name aloud, and priests warned that even to speculate about their true nature was to invite ruin. Yet in every age there were skeptics, voices who saw the ban as myth. And among those skeptics, none was louder than Consul Van. He had risen through ambition, clever in politics but reckless in judgment, building his career by mocking the fears of others. To him, the great taboo was nothing more than a leash, forged to keep the council under the sway of older, more timid species. His speeches were filled with disdain, urging boldness, demanding the end of superstition. The universe belongs to the living, he declared, not to ghosts of the past. He believed that the human silence was proof of weakness, a story inflated to maintain control. If they had been mighty, they would not have vanished. If they had been gods, their ruins would not lie in dust. Draven cultivated followers who hungered for progress unbound by fear. He promised them power, wealth, and dominion over knowledge locked away for millennia. His greatest ambition was to step where no one dared, to set foot on the world forbidden by legend and claim the secrets buried there. In secret chambers he rallied support, gathering explorers, scientists, and soldiers, weaving a coalition strong enough to defy the Council's hesitation. Every warning was dismissed. Elders spoke of anomalies in the past, of times when fragments of human relics had been disturbed and nearby systems mysteriously collapsed. Draven dismissed them as coincidence, distortions of natural cosmic cycles. He craved proof, something tangible that would secure his legacy. Skepticism hardened into arrogance, and arrogance became resolve. The preparations were meticulous. Fleets disguised their destination, records falsified to prevent interference, probes launched ahead to map the path. The target was a quiet blue-green planet orbiting a modest star, ignored by most charts, yet marked in every ancient codex with the same seal: do not approach. When Dravan's expedition neared it, they saw a world serene under clouds, oceans glimmering, continents draped in forests and ice. To his eyes, it was not a forbidden place but a prize. As their craft descended, the atmosphere thick with silence, they found ruins half buried in stone and snow. Colossal structures, geometric and precise, still hummed faintly with energy despite uncounted ages. Draven stood within them, intoxicated by the sight of machines beyond his imagination. He proclaimed triumph, certain that history would remember him as the one who shattered a lie. Yet his instruments told another story. Beneath the ruins, deep within the crust, something stirred. Readings spiked beyond comprehension, signals not random but rhythmic, deliberate, like the beating of a heart too vast to belong to any creature known. His advisors grew uneasy, begging retreat. They whispered that the warnings were true, that this was not a myth but a slumbering force. Draven silenced them, his eyes fixed on the readings, convinced he was on the brink of unlocking divinity itself. He ordered further excavation, pushing deeper, ignoring the tremors that shook the ground. Across the galaxy, distant sensors flared. Communication networks faltered with strange interference, as though a hidden voice was echoing through the void. Starships lost navigation for fractions of seconds, yet those fractions were enough to cause collisions, scattering debris across trade routes. Worlds felt a presence, subtle yet undeniable, as if the air itself remembered something older than the stars. Civilizations that had long forgotten fear felt it return, prickling their skin, whispering through their dreams. The council convened in panic, voices raised in terror, elders repeating the same phrase again and again. Someone had broken the rule. Though no official report had yet confirmed it, all knew where the disturbance pointed. Eyes turned toward the sector Dravan had vanished into. And with each moment, the disturbances grew stronger, the tremors more violent. Beneath the planet's crust, something vast shifted, its long rest disturbed. What had once been forgotten began to remember. What had once been dormant began to awaken. The Consul believed he had found his victory, but in truth, he had struck the first note of a song that would drown the galaxy. The silence of humanity was ending. The first signs were subtle, ripples carried across the void that no ordinary species would have noticed. Transmission arrays flickered, data streams scrambled into patterns that were neither random nor decipherable. Navigational systems aligned to false stars, ships veering off course into empty gulfs. At first, the affected empires argued among themselves, blaming rival powers for sabotage, but soon the pattern spread too far, too quickly, for doubt to remain. It was not targeted interference. It was the universe itself reacting to something long asleep now stirring. Entire sectors reported failures that defied explanation. Automated fleets, reliant on artificial intelligence to patrol borders, went dark in unison, leaving colonies vulnerable. Orbital stations blinked off the network and reappeared seconds later, their clocks displaced by centuries, as though time had bent around them. Black holes, once steady in their pull, pulsed erratically, swallowing light in uneven surges. Stars flared too soon, their lifespans collapsing into chaos. What should have been immutable constants of physics bent and twisted in ways no scholar could comprehend. Council chambers filled with fear. Representatives from every corner of known space arrived with stories too consistent to be dismissed. What they had believed to be myths were becoming fact. Elders among the longest-lived races shook with dread as they named what the younger races dared not, echoes of human awakening. They had seen this once, in fragments of recorded history. They had buried the truth behind warnings and edicts. They knew these were not accidents but side effects of something ancient remembering its existence. Meanwhile, Dravan, still confident in his defiance, interpreted the anomalies as evidence of human weakness. To him, the destabilization meant humanity's technology was outdated, unstable, vulnerable to his control. He broadcast declarations of victory to his supporters, proclaiming that the veil had been lifted, that the humans were no more than relics whose systems faltered at the touch of alien hands. His words reached beyond his fleet, sowing confusion and dividing the council. Some younger factions, driven by greed or envy, began to question whether the old fears had been exaggerated all along. But in hidden corners of space, others knew better. Entire civilizations withdrew their fleets from border conflicts, abandoning territorial disputes they had fought over for centuries. Great empires locked down their worlds, sealing wormholes and severing trade routes in preparation for a storm they knew they could not stop. Refugees poured across neutral zones, fleeing not from war but from the intangible sense that the universe itself was shifting against them. On the world beneath Dravan's feet, tremors became quakes. The ruins he had uncovered pulsed with light, resonating at frequencies that made flesh crawl and bones ache. His scientists detected signals so vast they spanned not just the planet but the entire system, waves of thought that were neither mechanical nor organic yet carried deliberate intent. Machines dormant for eons hummed in unison, aligning with forces far beyond the comprehension of Dravan's expedition. Reports reached the Council of Dreams spreading through populations light-years apart. Entire planets woke screaming, claiming to have seen figures of fire and steel standing at the edge of their consciousness. In these visions, humans did not speak, yet their presence conveyed judgment, a weight so immense it felt like the crushing gravity of a star. Clerics called it prophecy, scholars called it mass hysteria, but every empire recognized the same truth beneath the descriptions. The humans were no longer sleeping peacefully. Efforts to contain the knowledge failed. Even as the Council tried to censor the reports, evidence accumulated faster than it could be suppressed. Trade convoys recorded bursts of radiation patterned into what could only be intentional signals. Explorers returning from deep space swore they had seen silhouettes moving between galaxies, dark forms blotting out starlight. The sheer consistency of these accounts broke the last vestiges of denial. Panic rose, but Draven remained unshaken. He clung to the belief that humanity's awakening was not a threat but an opportunity. In his arrogance, he saw himself not as a transgressor but as a liberator of truths. He pressed his excavation deeper, demanding his crews unlock every sealed chamber, every artifact, no matter the cost. Across the galaxy, however, ancient instincts resurfaced. Civilizations that had long forgotten humility bent under the return of something greater than themselves. Their leaders remembered the warnings etched in forgotten languages: do not wake them. The words had always seemed abstract, a relic of superstition. Now, with every disrupted star and every trembling world, they rang with undeniable truth. And beneath the planet's surface, what Draven sought stirred further. Each pulse grew stronger, sharper, more deliberate, as though it were not merely an awakening but a response. The universe had changed because humans were opening their eyes. And those eyes, once focused, would see who had dared to disturb their rest. The descent into the ruins revealed that Draven had not uncovered mere remnants of a lost civilization but an infrastructure still alive, slumbering with intent. Walls of black stone glowed faintly, etched with lines of light that pulsed in unison with the tremors underfoot. His fleet's most advanced scanners failed to map the structures. Readings bent back upon themselves as if the machines were being denied access to reality itself. For every chamber they forced open, 10 more revealed themselves, each larger and stranger than the last. Energy fields swirled around them, currents of power untouched by entropy, a technology designed not simply to last but to wait. When the first awakening came, it was without sound or fire. A pressure filled the air, so absolute that every living creature felt their chest tighten, as though an unseen presence had entered their lungs and claimed their breath. Instruments froze. Displays went black, then filled with strings of human language no alien system should have known. Not words of welcome, not even warning, but phrases cold and deliberate. "We are aware." With those syllables, Draven's expedition ceased being explorers and became intruders standing on sacred ground. Structures long thought inert reconfigured themselves in front of stunned eyes. Towers rose from beneath glaciers, piercing the sky with impossible speed. Platforms unfolded into geometric shapes that hung unsupported in the air. Entire cities shifted as if stretching after an endless sleep, their surfaces shining with light older than the stars around them. Every pulse of energy spread outward, a wave carried across the cosmos, felt instantly by civilizations light years away. No fleet, no empire, could hide from the rhythm of something greater reasserting its place. The humans were not as Draven had imagined. They were no scattered remnants of a biological species, no frail organisms lingering in decay. What emerged from the ruins was a consciousness layered upon itself, flesh and machine inseparably woven, memory and instinct united. They were singular yet infinite, individuals subsumed into something vast, their identity sharpened into a collective that remembered every insult, every trespass. Their power was not in weapons but in the very laws of physics, twisted and shaped to serve their will. When the alien ships stationed above attempted to flee, they never cleared the atmosphere. Gravity shifted without warning, folding space upon itself until hulls crumpled like paper. Entire squadrons vanished into silence, not destroyed in fire but simply erased. No projectile had been launched, no beam discharged. Humanity had no need for weapons in the sense the galaxy understood. Their defense was existence itself, an overwhelming assertion that no foreign presence was permitted without consent. The Consul, watching through long-range relays, fell into horror as evidence streamed in. The humans had not just stirred, they had awakened angry. The Consul's defiance had not broken superstition but confirmed it with catastrophic clarity. For the first time in living memory, every faction agreed on something. This was not a rival to negotiate with, nor an enemy to conquer. This was judgment given form. Messages from the awakened consciousness flowed across communication networks without the use of transmitters. No matter the species, every mind could hear the same impression carved into thought: awareness sharpened with rage, patient yet unforgiving. They knew who had disturbed their sleep, and they wasted no energy on ambiguity. The humans were not rising blindly. They understood who had violated the ancient pact. Draven himself, standing before machines that no longer ignored him, felt the shift directly. He had spent his career dismissing warnings, mocking those who bowed to fear. Now he faced it in its purest form, the presence of a will so vast his own mind seemed insignificant, a spark before a storm. His arrogance collapsed into silence, but it was too late to repent. Humanity's gaze had turned outward, and once awake, they would not close their eyes again. Retaliation came not as war usually came, with declarations and fleets gathering, but as silence broken by precision. The Consul's homeworld, once a thriving seat of power, ceased to exist in less than a breath. Satellites orbiting the planet recorded no fire, no invasion, only the sudden erasure of cities replaced by glass and shadow. Oceans boiled, skies darkened, and then nothing remained. Billions vanished, their civilization reduced to whispers of static carried through the void. Other rulers who had once supported Dravan's arrogance watched this fate unfold, and felt the cold realization that no wall, no fleet, no treaty could shield them from the consequence of defying the rule. Human vessels appeared without fanfare, not crossing space by propulsion but emerging where they willed, dark constructs of impossible geometry. They carried no insignia, no signatures of power, yet their presence eclipsed entire armadas. Weapons trained upon them found no target, for the ships were not bound to ordinary physics. When fleets opened fire, their bolts of plasma and beams of energy bent back upon their origin, annihilating their own ranks. Defenses that had stood against centuries of war were rendered useless, not by superior armament, but by humanity's command over reality itself. The galaxy witnessed the collapse of Dravan's forces with both awe and terror. Human counterstrikes were not indiscriminate. They were deliberate, surgical, precise. Systems loyal to Dravan burned while those uninvolved were left untouched, a message as sharp as any blade. Humanity sought not conquest but retribution, each action chosen to punish arrogance rather than erase existence wholesale. For every fleet destroyed, for every capital silenced, the same phrase resonated through intercepted transmissions: "You were warned." The Council attempted to act. Messages of apology, pleas for negotiation, and desperate offers of tribute were sent across every channel. They reached human vessels but received no acknowledgement beyond an implacable pulse of energy that forced all systems into shutdown. Alien leaders convened emergency sessions, their voices cracking as they debated how to contain what had been unleashed. Yet deep down, they knew containment was no longer possible. The humans were not invaders to be bargained with, nor liberators to be welcomed. They were the keepers of a law the galaxy had forgotten, and now they had returned to enforce it. Those who tried to resist were extinguished swiftly. A coalition of younger species, emboldened by Dravan's rhetoric, rallied a defensive wall of hundreds of ships, each bristling with their most advanced weapons. Humanity's response was a single wave of distortion that unraveled the coalition mid-battle. Vessels twisted apart without fire or explosion, their crews dissolved into silence. Observers reported no debris, only a brief shimmer of light before the ships were gone as though they had never existed. The lesson was undeniable: resistance was futility given form. Dravan, once a figure of confidence and defiance, found his name cursed across the stars. The destruction of his world became a warning etched into the minds of every surviving species. His ambition had not elevated him to legend, it had reduced him to infamy. Mothers whispered his name to frightened children, rulers invoked it as a reminder of the price of arrogance. Yet none of it mattered to the humans. To them, Dravan was not even an enemy, merely a trigger, a careless hand that had pressed the wrong seal and unleashed the inevitable. Every empire now stood on edge, uncertain who might be judged next. The humans had proven their strength, but their intent was still a shadow. Were they bent on universal subjugation, or did they seek only to punish those who broke the covenant? That question lingered in the halls of power, spreading paranoia and unrest. Worlds fortified themselves, not in the hope of victory, but in the desperate attempt to buy time. Trade collapsed, alliances fractured, and fear became the common language of the galaxy once more. Through it all, humanity remained silent, their vessels drifting across systems with the patience of predators unchallenged by prey. Their lack of demands was as frightening as their power. Nothing could be bought, nothing could be negotiated. They acted not as conquerors but as enforcers of a truth older than empires. When you wake the humans, you face the weight of their judgment. And judgment had only begun to fall. The silence that followed was heavier than the destruction itself. Across the stars, fleets stood down, rulers ceased their endless rivalries, and entire civilizations waited, breath held, for humanity's next move. The absence of demands was more terrifying than conquest. Armies could be bargained with, tyrants could be appeased, but this awakening offered no negotiation, only inevitability. Every passing moment reinforced that the humans were not a new empire rising but an old power reclaiming its place, unshaken by the passage of ages. When their voice came, it was not through transmissions or symbols but through thought itself. Across every inhabited world, sentient beings felt it in their minds, a presence vast and calm yet unyielding. It carried no malice, only clarity sharpened like steel. The law had been broken, and balance would be restored. The message was not spoken in words but carved into consciousness. All understood the same meaning, regardless of tongue or species. You were told not to wake us. You chose defiance. Now you will remember. What followed was not annihilation of all, but the enforcement of order. Human fleets moved with precision, striking at powers that had thrived on oppression and conquest, erasing those who built empires on the suffering of weaker races. Their punishment was absolute, swift, and final. Worlds that had enforced slavery saw their chains dissolved, their overseers eradicated in moments. Armadas that had preyed upon neighbors were dismantled without resistance, their remnants scattered as warnings. In each case, humanity left survivors not to rebuild empires but to carry the memory of what defiance had cost. For those who had remained cautious, who had honored the old warnings even in doubt, there was no destruction. Human presence passed them by like a storm skirting their horizon, acknowledging their restraint without word. To them, survival was not granted by favor but by proof that humility still existed among the stars. The pattern became unmistakable. The awakened humans had no interest in conquest for its own sake. They sought correction, a resetting of the balance long distorted by ambition and arrogance. The galaxy adapted swiftly. Trade resumed, but not in the frantic greed of before. Border wars ceased, not from treaties but from the weight of fear. Even the most stubborn warlords withdrew their fleets, knowing that any act of expansion would draw human attention. Across thousands of systems, order emerged not from diplomacy but from the shadow of power too immense to oppose. For the first time in ages, the galaxy moved not by ambition but by restraint. Those who sought to test this new balance discovered its limits instantly. A cluster of worlds attempted to form a secret coalition, plotting to strike back while humanity's attention seemed elsewhere. Their efforts ended before they began. The coalition's leaders vanished in unison, their strongholds reduced to silent ruins. No declaration followed, no warning broadcast. The message was in the silence itself. Humanity's vigilance was constant, their judgment swift. Religions rose in their wake, venerating the humans as both destroyers and guardians. Some called them gods, others executioners, but none denied their dominance. Political orders reshaped themselves around appeasement, entire civilizations reforming laws to avoid any chance of attracting attention. The Consul's name endured not as the champion he dreamed to be, but as the embodiment of folly, the one whose arrogance reminded the galaxy of what it had long tried to forget. In the end, the humans did not vanish back into slumber. They lingered, their vessels scattered across the stars, silent watchers whose presence ensured compliance without constant intervention. Earth itself became a beacon, no longer cloaked in silence but blazing with light that pulsed across the void, a constant reminder that their rest was over. The final lesson was etched into every heart and mind. Humanity was not merely another species among countless others. They were the apex, the standard against which all would be measured, the law woven into the foundation of the universe. To wake them was to summon judgment, and judgment spared no arrogance. The galaxy had been reminded of fear, and in that fear, order returned.